Hi, Barney.
Hi, Stephen. How are you? Long time no see.
It is a long time no see. Thanks for joining us this morning. I hear that you're pretty busy at the moment.
Yep, a great pleasure to be out of the editing suite, or still in the editing suite, but looking at a different screen to videos and recordings.
So yeah. Nice where are you actually speaking from? Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Cambridge. I live in Cambridge.
All right.
In UK, obviously. Just actually about 10-minute walk from King's.
So. Oh, nice. Oh, that's nice and handy. I'm in the Forest of Dean, very close to the Welsh border. And I've been chatting with various people from the a cappella world, old friends, and we call the series From a Distance, but actually not as the crow flies from kind of Gloucester, Ross and Wye over to Cambridge. It's not too far.
Probably not too far, though the transport links are useless. So.
They are. It takes you about 3 days to do that.
Probably get to New York quicker.
So Barney, you need no introduction. I mean, everybody knows Barnaby Smith. Everybody knows Voces 8. It is an absolute amazing journey. This last decade and a half plus.
Yeah, just turned 15.
Yeah, and it is an amazing example of what can be done with talent and hard work and vision. I mean, you've turned a thought, an idea, a passion for singing into this amazing global brand, which, is all credit to all that hard work that we know goes on behind it.
And a significant amount of luck.
Well, yes, that sometimes helps.
From people like you.
That sometimes helps. Start. Let's look back at how you started, because we all come from a slightly different angle. We happen to have been boy choristers. I know you were a boy chorister, but take us back to those early days, because some people are interested in that.
Yes, well, I mean, I think a big part of the way the whole thing's been built is an organic growth and a sense of family business, and it really did start as a family. So 4 of the founder members of the group were all choristers together back in the 90s in Westminster Abbey. And actually Dingle, who was the bass in the group for the first decade, we were really good friends with Dingle whilst we were choristers, but then we just sort of didn't see him for 4 or 5 years after we left. And
an amazing bass, can I just put in? An amazing singer, yeah.
Yeah, he's an amazing.
So you were all together in Westminster Abbey?
We were all together, yeah. And when we sort of finished, so we all went off to our various music scholarships at different schools after that, and came together purely by chance in a choir called the Millennium Youth Choir, which is run by the School of Royal Church Music. And we used to do sort of residential courses, and we were in that for 3 or 4 years, and we grew out of it, but we still wanted to stay in touch. So originally Paul and I, and Paul's my brother, we just started arranging sleepovers at mostly our parents' house. But there are stories like we did a concert in York Minster, one of the first things we ever did, and Paul was at university there. We had no beds, so we were sleeping in the common room of Paul's sort of university house, and we got locked in. Sort of woke up at 8 in the morning, pulled the door, and the cleaner had locked, not realizing anything, and locked the door. So it all started like that, real out the back of a truck stuff, and and from there, we got a random invite, and this was the real catalyst for Voces 8. We got a random invite to a festival in Italy, in Gorizia, well-known singing competition. You may well have judged it.
Yeah.
And they basically said, will you come? We've heard of your choir. Will you come and sing in the competition? And if you come, we'll pay for your flights, your travel, your food, and you can sing 5 concerts. And this was as we were graduating from university. So you can imagine, to us, this was just a free week of our summer holiday to go abroad. And as part of that competition, there was a jazz and pop category, which we did with just 8 people, because originally the choir was sort of 20. And so we did it with 8, and we sung, our favorite King Singers arrangements in essence, and we won the competition. And off the back of that, people just started inviting us to go. I think the sort of other festival organizers who were there looked at us and thought, well, this is 8 people. This is, we could realistically bring them to our festivals. And so we probably made, out of that and a competition win the year later in Tolosa, we probably made as many, I reckon, 300 concert invites. And that was the real catalyst to us being able to say, okay, we can actually, dedicate our lives to this. Most people were living at home, so didn't have massive overheads and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, that
and Tolosa. You went to the Tolosa competition as well.
We won there in 2006, and that was.
And of course, all those competitions talk to each other, and you become
exactly. And so, I mean, for the first 2 or 3 years of the group, we were pretty much touring that circuit of contacts, giving the concert at a call competition, for example. And it was just amazing. We made so many friends. It was just great. I mean, that things change, and when you sort of get more up the ladder, it becomes a bit of more of an in-out job. And of course, you still meet people. Back in those days, you'd go and you'd spend 3 days doing a concert, and so you really got to spend time in communities and make connections. And we're still in touch with all those people, and it's lovely.
And when you first started, I saw a little nugget of information that said you started in 2003 and then regathered or reformed in 2005. What was happening around that time?
Yeah, well, in 2003, that was the chamber choir. So that was the getting locked in at York Minster and sleeping.
So that was a bigger group then. No?
That was a bigger group of about 20 of us, sort of all the mates from Millennium Youth Choir. And you'll know Dore Abbey probably, because it's in the neck of the woods. Yeah, we made a CD in Dore Abbey, which actually is not publicly available. We actually make it publicly available. It's rustic, shall we say, but really nice in so many ways. It sort of has a naive enthusiasm about it, which I think is probably a hallmark of our first 5 years as a group, at least. But yeah, it was brilliant. We all slept on the village hall floor.
And were you all sort of doing bits, university singing, choral scholarships, or solo singing?
All that stuff. So we mentioned Dingle already. He was at the Guildhall. I had a course at Royal Holloway, and I then went and studied in Basel for postgraduate. Paul, my brother, is the outlier. He didn't read music. He read philosophy, politics, and economics in York. You'll remember Charles from the early days. Charles is a PhD in classics from Durham. So Kath was in Edinburgh, Emily Cambridge, Andrea Cardiff. So really like all over the place, and we met through this Millennium Youth Choir, which was a sort of national choir setup. We used to come together in holidays. So brilliant memories.
And in those early days, having both Paul and yourself driving that group was I mean, that vision and that hard work, that push, because I know from the early King Singers days, just from inheriting, standing next to someone like Simon Carrington and hearing what really needed to happen in those early days. It's easy to join a group that's pretty famous, the new guys in Voces 8, well, oh, great, I'm in Voces 8. But when you start out, when every break is a big deal, and when every concert is thank goodness for that, rather than not another week in the Far East, or another week here.
I remember the first CD we made was that concert in York Minster, and we actually recorded it on what back then was a mini disc player, not intending to do anything with it, but it actually turned out quite well. So I converted it onto a CD, which back then was a big deal. That was the height of technology. And then I handmade 100 copies. I went to WH Smith and bought like those 10 CD make packs. I turned my inkjet printer up to full resolution. It used to take me about an hour and a half to actually just print all the necessary assets to make these 100 live in York Minster CDs. And that is how we put the first £1,000 in our bank account. That's sort of, incredible.
Yeah. I remember stories from the old guys, Brian and Simon, when they first started, they used to get in touch with their old schools and convince their old schools that they needed a concert, because they all went to sort of nice private schools who could afford to pay them a little bit of money. And they went around kind of doing tours of their old schools, which was
we have a similar thing, I'm sure we'll come on to it in a minute, but we also set up a foundation when we started, and a big part of the support that we needed to be doing that work was from the public schools that we had all attended, who were keen to support their local community.
that was a brilliant ruse. We will get onto it in a minute. So
it's sort of cap in hand, isn't it?
yeah. By 2005, then you boiled down to 8 voices.
Yes.
And you're not the first 8-voice group that there's ever been. There's another rather famous English group who are 8 voices, but pretty sort of stuck in the jazz and Bach groove, the Swingles.
Yeah.
But certainly an inspiration to many groups to see what is possible with 8 voices and that breadth you can get.
Yep. And people always ask us, why did you pick the lineup that you picked? Well, the answer is those were the most obvious singers to choose from the group of 20. And they always say, why 2 countertenors? Well, I mean, it wasn't really a choice. It was just Chris and I were the sort of leading altos in that group, and that's how it came to be. But yeah, I mean, we sort of have fallen on our feet in so many ways, and this is one of them. I remember actually when we were studying with you in Lübeck, and you said to me, gosh, you're so lucky because you can perform all that polychoral repertoire, which in the King Singers we can't do because there's only 6 of us and we need 2 more singers. And so yeah, we were able to spread our wings a lot. And I think, you know, people often say, well, you must have sat down and planned it, but I think a lot of it's instinct. And if you look at the repertoire, even that the group performs a lot now, it's a reflection of the various different ways that we have been connected to music and inspired. So I mean, in the group now we have Johnny and myself, who would term ourselves early music specialists. And we have Blake, who didn't know who William Byrd was till he was 20 years old and had grown up on drum kit. Blake's dad played drums for Tina Turner, and
that's rather refreshing, isn't it, to have something
exactly
like that?
And so it's just so many different strands of being inspired. And of course, the 2 main groups in the UK, the King Singers and the Swingles, had a huge impact. And a lot of people say to us, they're like, oh, it was a really good business move because you placed yourself, you know, right between the King Singers and the Swingle Singers. I'm like, well, that was just luck, because we enjoy both of those groups, and throw in a bit of cathedral music and you land somewhere in the middle. So but it's a really good palette, isn't it? 8 singers, really, really nice. The options are varied and many, and you know, especially now we have a female alto, Katie.
2020, you made a switch there.
When Chris decided to step aside, I mean, we didn't, again, not a conscious choice. We said whoever is the best singer who walks through the door, male or female, then we'll take them. But of course, at the time, I think the group maybe needed it because of the types of repertoire, and not even the types of repertoire, but just the sheer versatility of what we now do. Having a female voice is helpful, but also, you know, she's not just an ordinary voice. She actually sounds quite full set.
I mean, it's worth saying, isn't it, that here in the UK, and people on the continent or in America who might watch this don't appreciate, but we've had a big kind of renaissance in English cathedral music making, and we now have women who sing alto parts, and this, you know, in that fair opportunities world we live in now, and so and I know here, even in our local cathedral here in Gloucester, we have a job share. So we have a job share at Lay Club with 2 ladies who sound fantastic. They've been choral scholars. They've been kind of honed in the style, and that English style. And you know, that you close your eyes, you can't tell. You know, it's a little bit So that's good. That's good to hear. And no mics. Did you ever play with mics?
Well. Before we came on air, you said, you know, you can share your stories, successful and unsuccessful, good and bad. Yeah, we've had some bad experiences with mics, to be honest, Steve, and I think a lot of it is based on the fact that when we have used them, we haven't been fully knowledgeable of how to do it, both as singers but also as tech probably. But also I think that the type of voice that works on a microphone is not always the type of voice that works acoustically, and certainly the singing has to often be different too. And so we have had forays. We had what I would consider to be an unsuccessful tour of the US, where we did half the concerts on on mic. And I think, I mean, if you look at the groups that do it well, the way they use the technology, it's not just amplification anymore. And so there's that element to it. But I also think from our perspective, just we would be in the position of just amplifying. And I think that one of the things that makes a cappella so amazing is the fact you can almost feel like you're reaching out and touching the singer's soul. It's just so pure, isn't it? And the moment you stick a mic in front of that, there's an element of technology in the way. So if you're not using it to an advantage, which we wouldn't be, then why do it at all? So we've tried and not successfully, I think would be the fairest way to put it.
I was interested to hear, and I just wondered, if you're invited to do a kind of an orchestral pops gig, presumably that happens still.
It does happen, yes. I mean, we prefer, if at all possible, to sing with acoustic amplification rather than a handheld mic. But we do sometimes do it, and some members of the group, like Blake, for example, is obviously trained. And that's another problem in the fact that some people are better than others. So, people like, miking a full set is like that is very difficult. So I never come out of it well. But we will sometimes sing acoustically amplified. Also in the bigger halls. Same for you guys, wasn't it, when you were in the group?
Personally, I remember some terrible times on mics because, as you've just said, you turn up. And unless you're taking your own sound guy, your own mics, you have in-ear monitors, you have the whole thing. You're turning up. And my first ever concert, my King Singers debut concert, was in the Beau Séjour Art Centre in Guernsey on mics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Baptism of fire.
Sorry?
Baptism of fire.
It was quite horrific, because...
It can be good for the bass lines, though, can't it?
It can be very easy for the bass lines, and can just stick it down your throat. But, my first go on a microphone was in the rehearsal for the concert. So that's, we didn't have our own mics. In fact, for many years, we didn't have our own mics. We used to turn up and do things like the Boston Pops, Cincinnati Pops. And you just hope that they've got a good sound guy. And one of us would have to sit with the sound down until we got the balance, until we got the EQ right. But usually it took away, as you said, that magic of that sound, those sounds coming together, the harmonics that they go with the mics. We did actually experiment a little bit with head mics.
Yeah, Madonna.
We did a bit of
King
Madonna.
Singers do Madonna.
We did a bit of Madonna. We did a tour with Evelyn Glennie, and we had. It wasn't because she was loud, although she can be quite loud. It was a problem with. We did the second half was basically a kind of concert, semi-stage production of The Lion King. Can you of all the things that you do and look back and think, did we really do that? But we had these kind of, and I remember we sat down in a meeting and discussed which colour we would get, because they come in different colours and different flesh tones. And we actually had a business meeting. We went with the kind of flesh tone, and we were talking about lights and how they would look in the lights. And I think on the first time they went on an aeroplane, the little unit that does the radio bit of the miking got damaged, and then we had to have a new one put.
Nightmare.
It is nightmare.
I mean, we did a concert with the Swingles in our digital festival that we're currently running, and these guys are obviously guys that do it a lot. And even for them, they are slick when they come in the venue. They've got their stage boxes, but just watching them walk up the street towards the venue, I was like, acoustic's good for me. I mean, really. And then their sound guy, what he does on the computer is incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And that sound guy becomes the seventh member of the group, or the ninth member of the group. I'm going to be speaking in a few weeks to Midge Parry, actually, which will be interesting, because you are. I mean, some acoustics work well. It's like some acoustics work fantastically well for a cappella voices, unmiked. Some acoustics are really hard to make work. I was listening to some beautiful singing this morning, and I was listening to a bit of Palestrina on YouTube. You guys did a bit of Palestrina. From memory, which is very impressive as well. And I was just thinking about the whole idea that we can just touch music very, very easily. I mean, it's once you record something, it's there, isn't it? Kind of forever. And even if you take it down, somebody else might still have it up somewhere. It is amazing these days. You can sit at home and have this whole digital experience. And that's been quite important in this last year with this pandemic.
I think it's been, for us, it's been important probably for the last 5 or 6 years. We started making videos, I think in 2014, 15, and we were amazed by how far they reached and how deeply touched people were by them. And I think everything in our ethos as an organization and a group is to inspire, I suppose, community music making, and to inspire people to find the beauty of choral music and be inspired to find their own voice. And so this has been a really good outlet. Actually, that Magnificat is, I don't know if you remember, but you did coach us on it in Lübeck. It's been in the...
Did I?
You did.
There was a few videos I was watching. That another one was Straighten Up and Fly Right, which I think we'll talk about later. But yes, it's funny, isn't it, that little... I don't know if that would have helped at all, but...
yeah, no, we've been singing the Magnificat and Straighten Up for, the group. They're sort of group staples. But yes, this digital thing, I mean, we actually treat digital music as its own territory. So the internet for us is a territory, as we would think about America or Germany. And we consider very carefully, for the reasons that you say, how we handle our output. And that's a big part, I think, of brand development, because you have to remember, like, when you're within a group, like I am and you've been, you know the group very well. And so sometimes it's difficult to appreciate other people's perspectives of the group. But other people's perspectives of the group are really driven these days by what they find on the internet. If you compare how much one of our fans might watch on the internet compared to how many concerts they might have come to, etc., etc., etc. So that shop window, which was a website, wasn't it, 10 years ago? 10 years ago, the website was everything. And then it was Facebook was everything. And now it's kind of YouTube, actually, I think. YouTube and Spotify. So, we think about that a lot. And we want to keep in touch with our fan base with it. I think the other thing to consider, especially if you're a young and upcoming musician, is that the world is now a place where people can get instant gratification. And we could sit here and talk very deeply about whether that's a good or a bad thing for a long time. But I think if you want to remain relevant and become relevant in the music industry these days, it's really useful to understand that digital presence for people to constantly be in touch with you is these days just the norm. And and so we make a lot of digital content. And during the pandemic, as you say, of course, it's almost taken on a life of its own. And I think the pandemic, when we look back on it, will become a very positive thing for the music industry. There's a lot of chat at the moment, isn't there, about how difficult it is, and rightly so. The genuine income streams for musicians have been cut. And that's very difficult. But what it is forcing us to do is think about how we can communicate our music differently, and in many ways for the classical music industry to catch up a little bit with technology. And I think that's a really good thing. So we've been running a digital festival called Live from London, and that's been really nice, both for us in terms of keeping our music out there, but also trying to encourage collaboration and a commitment from the whole industry to get music out there, and to do it in a way that's supportive of each other, because I think
that's fantastic. I'm going to come on to the spring festival and the lineup, because it's a really lovely, and it's so well presented. I was looking through it in the last few days, and tough times, but I think it makes people look inwards a little bit and think about how really what we're about and how we define ourselves. And nobody will ever moan again about having to spend the 21st night on a tour rather than coming back before 3 weekends. All those kind of things where, oh gosh, I've only got 3 days at home. We will it will put us in a different perspective. Talk to us a little bit about commissioning new music, because I know that's being, I'm just thinking about Eschenwals and some of the names that I've seen bandied around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that we're connected to a publishing house, Edition Peters, and we're very grateful for that collaboration. I think that we see it as our responsibility to, as we enjoy music from generations past, we see it as our responsibility to create music for generations to come. And it's a really nice way of leaving a legacy, isn't it, as well? CDs are great and all that sort of thing, but actually creating new art is a really nice thing to do. So we do it in a number of different ways. I mean, we have a composer in residence scheme. At the moment, our composer in residence is Roxana Panufnik. We've also had Jonathan Dove, Oli Yalo, and we're currently looking for our next composer in residence, if anyone's got any ideas. And as part of that scheme, we will take that composer's choral output and we will showcase it. We try to do something in every concert. I mean, if we're singing a gig on Mike of All Jazz, it gets a bit difficult to sing a piece of Roxana Panufnik, but what I mean. And then we'll also collaborate with that composer over the course of a season or two, both with commissioning and also performing, if that's what they do. And we're also very lucky that we have a record label that are really interested in commissioning interesting music that actually probably without them we ourselves wouldn't do. So looking much more at I suppose, how would you describe it, alternative choral music, stuff that you might find on game soundtracks, those sorts of composers who are not necessarily core classical. So we have a really broad range, and in any year we maybe do as many as 10 premieres, which is really really nice. And now, as part of our Live from London series, we've also created a diversity scheme, and we're looking at commissioning presenting composers who possibly historically have not been given as much interest, just because of the difficulties that we've been looking at with those Black Matters movement over the last 6 months. So loads going on, and I think a really important part. So we hope we can open doors to music for choirs around the world.
I mean, I do remember in my time in the King Singers that the contemporary music, the creating new music, paying for new music or getting somebody else to pay for new music and presenting it to people as part of a normal concert was was really important. I mean, it just felt like it was kind of the educational part of the concert.
Mhm.
You know, people come to hear the jazzy things, or maybe they like the madrigals or the Renaissance music, but it's kind of testing the public. It almost feels like you've got to stretch them a little bit.
And it's always amazing how much they respond to it. I think probably the times I get most emotional on stage are actually when I'm delivering something in a premiere, especially if the composer set. It's a really nice thing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it always, sometimes you get a score, don't you? And you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a bit wacky. Or I wasn't quite expecting that, or I'm not sure how this is. But without fail, people respond to it almost more. They have a more overt reaction to what they might do with something that is something you'd expect. So yeah, it's a really lovely thing to do.
And of course, it's all in the presentation, isn't it? But bringing people into the story of the commission, or to present it and let them feel that they're going to understand what's going to happen. I remember when I was a teenager, and I was a big fan of the King Singers back then. There wasn't a lot of a cappella around in at that time. Swingles were around, and I had an album called the Contemporary Collection, which, if you ever get the chance to hear it, it is quite an amazing album. It's got some Penderecki, it's got some, but it's got that brilliant piece by Paul Patterson called Timepiece on it. But it was recorded quite straight, so it became a kind of gimmick, a bit of a laugh of a piece. But it actually, when you hear the recording of it on the Contemporary Collection, which must have been early 70s or mid 70s, it's amazing. The whole creation scene at the beginning, or this sort of, it was kind of, nobody was doing that kind of thing. And I used to, as a teen, going to my teen parties, where you turn up with your bottle of cider, or you'd turn up with a bottle of sherry, whatever, and everybody would cram into each other and take their records along to play at the party. I used to take my King Singers Contemporary Collection along. and
you've only ever got cooler since then.
People thought it was weird, it's kind of thought I was weird, but thought this music, this voice is creating these clusters of sounds, and people sat around half wasted. It was quite interesting to present music to people who would be into Iron Maiden and all that sort of thing.
I mean, you must look back and be very proud of your time in the King Singers for the amount that you commissioned.
I mean, it was an ongoing process, as you know. You're preparing to do the first performance of something, but you've also put in place the next composer, or you're making plans. So it's an ongoing process. And as you know, some you perform once, and some they go into the repertoire, and you're performing them all the time. And you never really know until you start to perform something. I mean, we had a piece by John McCabe called Scenes in America Deserta. And it was settings of some lines by a chap called Rainer Banner from he traveling across America. Just a regular book. But he set some little a few lines. So a movement was called Cycling. And he's talking about going over the Silurian, cycling on the salt flats. But McCabe wrote amazing. I mean, they just lapped it up, the audiences. And I remember the pieces that Ligeti wrote for us, which were impossible to sing.
The nonsense.
The nonsense madrigals. And they were very difficult, and we never got them right. And we kind of got close to it. We recorded them for Sony. Complete Ligeti works. We kind of got close to it, but we never got them quite right, because he wrote such difficult music, but when it was right, it sounded amazing. But I enjoyed. I was going to ask you, actually, do you have? I know you said you think of yourself as an early music kind of. That's the forte. That's the specialist.
My training, more than anything else.
Do you have a favorite bit of music? Do you have a kind of music that you would choose to listen to?
Do you mean of Voces 8 or generally?
Just kind of generally vocal music. Is Renaissance music? Is
I would
William
say
Byrd
polyphony, generally
polyphony?
speaking, is my thing. So yeah, I mean, if I could take one genre of music to listen to a desert island, well, of course it would be Bach, because I just think the output is so great and varied and so amazing. But I think generally to sing the polyphony that we do, and often people ask what's your favorite piece that Voces 8 sing, and my answer is normally either Zing It, Dim Herrn, or Oh Clap Your Hands by Orlando Gibbons. I just love that stuff. But I really also this is a funny thing to say, isn't it? But I admire the group for the sound it makes in the contemporary repertoire that I was talking about with Decca. So this sort of soft floated hung sound. I think that's something we've developed in the last sort of 6 or 7 years that's now becoming a bit of a hallmark for the group. Andrea's a bit like David's sound in the King Singers with these guys. You can always tell when it's Andrea singing the top. And so I actually do listening to that for me is a passive experience because I enjoy it. Whereas listening to polyphony, I can't listen to polyphony and do anything else because it just grabs me. So
I was listening to your on your channel to A Boy and a Girl, Eric Whittaker.
Yeah.
And I think I might be wrong, but I think that's what you're talking about in developing that sound. Yeah. And what is so wonderful about that, and of course you know this, but what is so wonderful about that is you have single voices, essentially single voices. It's not a large choir. And looking at some of the comments, it's quite interesting to look at comments on videos because people just sometimes say the perfect thing, and it was about, I didn't realize there was such beauty in the dissonance until I heard Voces 8 sing it. You don't hear the clarity, and what the group provides is a real clarity to the sound. So what we love to hear is pieces like the Palestrina, but pieces like William Harris, Bring Us O Lord, English 8-part double choir, sung beautifully. I know kind of Nigel Short in a slightly larger way is doing the same thing with Tenebrae, but I've always maintained that there's nothing as appealing to hearing basically single voices doing it really well.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, it's something actually we learned from you guys, is that I think it can be, if you're not careful, it can be uncomfortable to hear slow chordal music with single voices. So that the trick is to sing in a way that makes it feel as though there are more singers. And so I think probably if you played, say, Bring Us O Lord God or A Boy and a Girl to somebody and didn't say who it was or played a video with it, and said how many singers, they might say 16. And that for me is the key, because you're actually getting the clarity of a single voice with the comfort of a chamber choir, and it's only achievable by going at it, isn't it, in this completely unified way. And nobody in the group at any moment on that CD or on that track is just singing. They're all singing for the group, and that's what we know from the King Singers, and what we've practiced so unbelievably hard for the last decade. But I mean, it's that for me, that's the technical pinnacle.
We hear it, or we don't actually hear it, we feel it,
and that's it, isn't it? The overtone,
when
how they
really fantastic singing. And just looking ahead, you've got this with great people to catch up with this spring festival. You've got E Flagellini, you've got yourselves, Academy of Ancient Music, and Stile Antico, all top names there. Tell us what people can expect.
Well, we are, with Live from London, we are trying to bring great music to people's homes. I'm not going to sit here and say it will ever replace live concerts, because it won't. There's nothing that replaces the feeling of being able to reach out and touch it in the room. But one of the really nice things I think about the festival, and feedback that we've had, is that people would not actually be able to see all these groups, possibly even in their lifetime, because they don't come near enough to their house. So we're hoping to offer people as close to a live experience as possible, to appreciate all of these groups, obviously in a time where there's no alternative. But looking ahead, possibly for the reasons just mentioned, we could continue. We just want to share the joy of music, the joy of choral music, I suppose, in particular. We do have some instrumental programs in there as well. But I think that a critical thing for us as a foundation through this pandemic is that we're very fortunate that we, in some ways, are resourced. We've been going for 15 years. We're in partnership with the Diocese of London, so we have this wonderful venue in London. We have, across all the staff of our foundation, a huge amount of expertise. And also, before the pandemic, we're in a strong financial position. And so we feel an obligation, a commitment to society almost, that we want to support our colleagues as much as we can. And so we have a model that's collaborative, and that where the musicians are taking the money. So hopefully by doing this and by people supporting it, for which we're very grateful, all these choirs will still exist in another year's time. And also an element of that we touched on earlier is this idea of the industry catching up. We hope that we can encourage these choirs, musicians, groups, if they haven't been doing it too much in the past, to engage in creating a digital platform for themselves, because I think that's only going to nourish their business model as we move into 2022. And it's, as I say, we've been doing it for 4 or 5 years. We're kind of within the group have quite a lot of tech savvy people, but it's not an easy, for us, it was a huge investment to get the kit to get this on the road. And it's not something that everybody can just do. So trying to provide support in that way as well, to help everybody in the industry remain relevant to their audience, I think is a key message as well. Yeah.
Plans for the future. We're starting to see things turning. Are there?
Yes, I hope so. We're lucky as an ensemble, as you were when you were touring, that the diary is full 18 months in advance, and if not more. So I can sit here today and say that at the moment, from May, I'm not sure when you're planning to air this, we have a full diary. Now, will it happen? No, because we have to do everything safely. But there is becoming I feel a sense of almost retort from the industry that people are finding ways to make it safe. So we, for example, are now COVID testing at our centre. And 6 months ago, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Tests didn't exist. If they did, we couldn't get our hands on them, etc., etc., etc. We're now looking at vaccinations, all that sort of thing. There is a fire in the belly of the industry to not lie on the canvas anymore and to get up and get on with it. And so we are obviously trying to be a part of that. So I'm confident that it won't be long before we're back out there singing concerts. But of course, as you know, Steve, the key to these things is you have to respect your enemy, don't you? And
sure.
Almost more than you respect yourself. And so we have to obviously do it carefully, and we will do. But
I had a nice chat with Johnny Howard on this in this series, celebrating really his 10th year with the group, and which he said in some ways had gone by very fast, and another, it just seems like yesterday that he joined, and then sometimes it feels, gosh, he's been doing it for the whole of his life. Voce's been going 16 years now. I presume, you know, that concert back in York Minster seems like yesterday sometimes, but there's a lot of concerts under the bridge.
Yeah, and you know, yes, it's been an amazing journey, and one of the things I think that a little road bump I've come to, and a reason that this pandemic has been very good for me, is that probably through the first decade at least, you're sustained by a constant flow of new exciting developments. But it, you know, like any growth curve, it shallows out a little bit, and it's been really nice. You know, I will not lie and say I was tired and I was in need of a break. I mean, I would not have chosen this to happen on those grounds, but every cloud, you know, and it's you know, you spoke earlier about perspective, and it has given the opportunity to sit back. And it's not that I didn't realize how fortunate I was, etc., but it's just that element of fatigue has now subsided. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, I was thinking, you know, gosh, how long can I do this? You know, what would I do if I can't do it anymore? Now I'm thinking, bring on the next 15 years. So that's a really nice thing. And
it is when something's kind of take away, it makes you reevaluate it. And everybody who's ever been in a group and is not in a group anymore misses it at some level anyway. And certainly making sounds with other people and performing. No, it's interesting to hear that.
I mean, you probably know, don't you, that from the outside looking in, it seems like this most amazing thing, and it's our job actually on a daily basis to present that. And actually, I think the thing I found tiring was not the music making; it's the public face showing people how enjoyable singing is, etc. But it is a difficult thing to have to do.
And what people don't see from the outside is the day-to-day grind. You're working with other people, and in your case, 7 other people, and you know, groups have their moments. People go through stressful times in their lives. People have different priorities at different times, and it can cause, well, kind of, you know, political tension. And even though we come together and create wonderful harmony in these groups, every group has its moments where, and people decide it's time for them to leave, and maybe we don't want them to leave, and then there's a new guy comes along who brings a different energy. And I was just going to ask you about that, because we always used to say the public story was always it is such a positive thing having a change, because it keeps the group fresh and it brings new energy into the group. Now, just looking at the changes over the years with Voces, how do you go about changes? What's the process? Is it always possible? Is it positive? You know, are you sad to see people go? How does it work? People see a new face and they just have this brilliant sound, and we get used to, you know, the fans get used to the new guy,
it's an interesting thing, isn't it? And as you say, it's kind of different for every person. I mean, I'll start by touching on the audition process for us, which is long. We do 3 rounds. We do a solo singing round to begin with, where it's a couple of pieces, a piece of classical and a piece of jazz, basically. Then we do a round singing excerpts with the group, and then we do a final round, which is all geared towards giving a short performance. So normally a half an hour recital with the group to an invited audience. And we do it across sort of 2 or 3 days. We give coaching and rehearsals, that sort of stuff, and job interviews and spending time socializing, which, as you know, is so important. And so it tends to be a process that takes 6 months just to get the blooming job in the first place, and then another 3 or 4 months to train. Yeah. So we always ask our singers if they want to not sing beyond the next season to let us know before that season starts. So we'll be putting out a job advert in maybe September, appointing in April, May, and that person then starts the following September. So it's a long process.
Yeah, it was similar in the chaos. It was similar. We used to say a year's notice. It wasn't always that. Yeah. Sometimes circumstances made it shorter, but a year's notice, and they're huge shoes to step into, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think everything you said about change and this outward facing story is, I actually do buy it. I think it is true. One thing I notice is that I think one of the dangers of our job is that you can get very comfy. And the nice thing about change is that not just the new person coming in bringing something different, but it actually makes everybody else almost reevaluate themselves and have to make changes themselves. So it does keep an element of freshness. I mean, there's a huge amount can be placed on how well rehearsed and how slick the group is. And of course, you basically lose so much of that instantly. So at the moment, Watchers 8 could walk out and from memory, we could just sing 3 or 4 concert programs from memory without an iota of rehearsal. And they're going to be 90% what the best we could do, you know? And then the moment you change one person, that's a house of cards. So it just topples right down. And that's, I think, one element of it being difficult for those people who stay. I think the other thing is that you make personal relationships, as you talked about this whole political thing. And I think people have to make decisions for themselves. And, you know, of course, we all consider the group and all that sort of stuff, but you do have to make decisions for your own life at the end of the day. And I think sometimes that causes an emotional reaction in other members of the group. But we get on and we are a family in the group and in the organization, and we try to support each other. We actually have a change coming up at the moment with Eleanor is leaving the group, and we won't lie, we're really sad to see her go, because she's done 4 years with us, which actually, as you know, in these sorts of ensembles is not a massively long career. But then you think, well, she's 21 and was 21 when she started, and 4 years to a 21-year-old, that is a long time. So actually, she's done a great stint, but we were really sorry to see her go, because she's so incredibly good. But she needs to move on with her life, and so that's the way it is, and we will support her and be pleased with that. And I'm delighted to say we're actually in the process of having just appointed a new singer, which we'll be announcing shortly. And you can probably even see I can't hide it, but I just sort of, it just makes me smile and feel happy, because what an opportunity for somebody new.
And they bring something new, and they develop, and it's interesting. I mean, Watchers 8 will be Watchers 8, depending on, you know, it's like the broom, isn't it? With the different handle and the brush ends, it's always the broom. I watched the King Singers, you know, on the King's Carol service that they stuck, and just watching the group, and it's very much the group I was a part of, but it's a long time ago. But different people, different era, slightly different style. You know, they're singing on iPads. They're much slimmer than we used to be. I was watching an old video the other day of very, very old, with Bob Chilcott with hair. You know,
that is old.
That is very old. Just before we finish, Barney, there's there is sort of news on a personal level about to hit, and do tell us a little bit like that.
People might be able to see behind me. In 6 days' time, I'm due my first son, my first baby. So, you know, we talk about people's life circumstances changing. I mean, that's a huge thing for me. So I'm really, really excited, and my colleagues have been very, very supportive, and who knows what changes that will bring about in Watchers 8. I mean, I'm not going to be leaving the group, I don't think, anytime soon, but that in its whole thing has a sort of a knock-on effect in some ways. So yeah, really excited about that. And
that's fantastic news, and it will change one's perspective. It just does, and I've seen that play out in all the people I sang with in the King Singers. You know, when some patter of feet comes along, it just makes you think in a slightly different way. I remember being in Leipzig for a big Bach fest, singing a rather terrible piece, but a terrible piece.
I think have I seen the video?
It might be.
That one.
Deconstructing Johann, which was not my favorite piece, but enough of the population seemed to like it a lot, unfortunately.
Had a little problem.
And it was raining in the square. But
I've seen it, yeah.
And during that performance, Paul Phoenix missed the birth of his son.
No.
Yeah.
Really? Goodness me.
And that's a major thing to you know. We talk about births and deaths as being the most important things you've got to be at or you've got to be around for. And the Kingsingers were, I mean, they committed in those early years so much that you know, they won't mind me saying, but a lot of marriages didn't survive because the work ethic was put so much ahead of. I remember back in 1993, well, it was in 1993, and we were expecting our son, Harry, and my first wife went into labour with Harry during a Spitalfields Festival concert. We were doing a premiere of, I can't remember, we were doing a Spitalfields concert anyway. It was quite a big premiere date, and my wife was in the Spitalfields market where they had the food fest with this huge kind of lump waiting. And that night she went into labour. The next day we were due in Angel Studios to record a couple of tracks for a Gilbert and Sullivan album. I can't even believe I'm saying.
I've sung some of those. I've sung Titwillow and a British Tar.
Yes, I can't even believe I'm saying those words. A Kingsinger's Gilbert and Sullivan album, but it does exist somewhere. And I rang our manager at the time, a lady called Julian Newson. I said, Julian, I can't come in today because I'm at the Whittington Hospital. We lived in Crouch End at the time in London, and that was our local hospital. And my son's going to be born. The guys are going to be recording today. Can they just lay down a backing track instead for that day for the Pirate King, and then I'll come in and put the solo on top another day. And I did. I think the next day I went in with my newborn in his little carrier to record the Pirate King, and he had his first studio experience at 24 hours old. At the time, the fact that I had said I'm not coming into the studio because I'm going to attend the birth of my, a studio recording, it was a big first.
Right.
So it's things have moved along. It's nice to hear that people take time and prioritize.
I've got some paternity leave coming up, and I kind of look at it. I think obviously I'm pretty blinkered vision on Watchers 8, and I think that's great in so many ways, but it probably also limits me in many ways too, and a slightly broader perspective, I hope, as a leader, is going to actually increase my abilities rather than hold me back in any way. So I'm excited for the change of horizon.
And is this the first child of Watchers 8?
Well, Chris, my former countertenor colleague, had Ginger when he was in the group, and we had a similar thing. Chris got paternity leave, and actually one of the great stories that pretty much comes up every time we see him. Chris is now works for operations of the whole foundation. He sort of takes an overview and helps out Paul with that, and so we see him quite regularly, and pretty much every day we see him, this story comes up that he took, we offered him various different options, so he could have had as much as the rest of the season off, which at the time was about 6 months, or he could have had 2 weeks or whatever. He took 2 weeks, and we had a lovely girl called Miriam from Ingenium Ensemble came in and sang with us for that period. And Chris came back to work, and the first gig we had was in a lovely abbey in France, and we were singing a piece of William Byrd, first piece in the program, called Diliges Dominum. It's just one of those pieces that's a wall of sound, all 8 voices. I think it's like a double canon or something, just or a canon retrograde or something, and it all just sings like that with all this clever stuff going on in the music. So Chris arrived off the Eurostar, whatever it was. We all got there for the rehearsal, and we started to sing. And after about 5 seconds, there was just this kind of next to me, and he was just in floods of tears. He was so, his emotion, just where he was emotionally, suddenly this singing started around him, and the poor guy was just like, oh, and so he had another month off. And Miriam stayed on. But yeah,
that's a lovely story.
Yeah.
Well, good luck for the next weeks, and
it might be a mess. Maybe we should catch up in 2 weeks' time.
It's a good time to do it, rather than being in the middle of the States or something like that.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Barney. I think we will probably be hearing Straighten Up and Fly Right. Just tell us a little bit. That's an arrangement that's stayed with you forever and a day.
It has, yeah. And I'd love to say before I go that extend our thanks to you, because back in the day, a big part of why Voces 8 exists today was because of the support that we have from yourself and your colleagues in the King Singers at the time. So
thank you.
And we mentioned Dingle earlier, and the tricks that you taught Dingle with how to sing the bass through the nose, the kind of all these things are still stuff that live on today, and we talk about in our rehearsals, and they come out in our concerts all the time, and such a
well, I can still hear that lineup in Lubeck singing Straighten Up and Fly Right in my head, because it was very impressive, and Dingle as that foundation was something world class, I must say. And but you could see that you were heading to amazing heights then, and I remember at the time in Lubeck thinking, why are these guys here? But we had a good time.
Wanted to learn, Stephen, and you were incredible. Well, I'm so pleased to see that you do a lot of teaching now, because you're an incredible pedagogue. It's actually high time. We've spoken about it, haven't we? Just haven't found a date that you come in, because we've got obviously since back then we've got a new bass section in the group, and they are desperate to spend time with you. So
I'm back in the UK now from my stint in Turkey, so I'd love to come over sometime.
We will find a date, and
well, thanks again, Barney. It's great, and all the best for the next weeks and for the months ahead.
Thank you.
And best wishes. Well, it's only Andrea, I think I know now.
Well, we have to put that right, don't we?
Yeah. All right. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.